Welcome to Turning Pages, a series of in-depth conversations with authors about their works.
That'll never work here. Challenging the myths around biking into Winter City. Part of the City Project, Patty Wiens joins me on the program to discuss it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, how did this come to be part of this City Project?
Well, when Mitch and Emma Durand-Wood were sort of brainstorming the ideas that were going to be in a story about the city, the first book being about finances, they started thinking, well, what's a good follow-up to finances? And there are many, but they approached me to be the second book about active transportation because I am the bicycle mayor of Winnipeg and I've been sort of really active in the advocacy field for about 2.5 years. So Mitch and Emma asked me if I would write something about active transportation and cycling in Winnipeg. And I was happy to say yes.
So you wrote this knowing it would be part of a series?
Yes. They asked me exactly about a year ago if I would write a book. And I said yes, because it sounded like a really neat series. So I feel very lucky because a lot of people write and really don't get published. So I wrote knowing that I was going to get published.
Did they give you any parameters or did they just say, hey, this is the topic, obviously you know about it, write what you know?
Yeah, it was a little bit of write what you know, write your experience. And then the parameters were how many words. And so I was supposed to keep it under 25,000 words or 23,000 around there. And also it wasn't going to be a research-based book. So I didn't have to dig into, research about cycling in a winter city or any kind of cycling advocacy. I had to write from my experience and things that I have been living through for the past 2.5 years.
So it's purposely not like an academic approach to this?
Absolutely not. No. It's a story, and I write it very much in my voice. I'm Brazilian. I moved here when I was 17 years old, and I come from a city where active transportation was really important. In fact, my hometown of Curitiba in Brazil is studied all over the world for its BRT system, and the whole world tries to mimic it. So, I come from there and moved to a city where winter is prevalent. So it was kind of it is my take on what that looks like.
Yeah, you obviously open with, the experience of riding, I think it was the 50th anniversary. You were visiting for that rail transit and kind of thinking like, I come from the future.
Yes, exactly.
So in terms of then writing this, obviously you've been doing advocacy work as the bicycle mayor. Like, how did you kind of start figuring out the framework for this book? Like what chapters, what sections, what things you wanted to hit and how you would arrange it?
I approached it from a storytelling perspective. So I thought about, this is my story. This is how it happened, how I moved here, how my life sort of went from, riding a bike when you're a kid to moving to a foreign country, realizing that just because it's flat, doesn't mean you can ride a bike everywhere. And then my journey into finding the bicycle as a mode of transportation. And how cute is that? I'm going to be the bicycle mayor. And here's my story of transformation. And then my accidental come to terms with the fact that when you ride a bike in this city, all bike lanes lead to City Hall. Everything that you do ends up being political because all of a sudden you start noticing that there is sort of a dichotomy between the way that drivers are treated and then everyone else outside of a car. And so that was sort of the approach that I took is let's start as someone who chooses a different form of transportation, and then how your eyes are now opened to what the transportation is like in the home city, as well as what the community looks like from the seat of a bike.
So your own journey, as you mentioned, you grew up and a bike represented freedom for you. And then
Yes.
you
And
come
I
to,
think it does for most kids.
right, that's very true. Uh, but you come to Winnipeg and realize like it's not built to accommodate biking, at least as you encountered it or experienced it in Brazil. So that period
Exactly.
when, you shift to the car, like, is it with a sense of regret? Like, how did you feel, or can you put yourself back in that headspace?
No, it was kind of like, I think that we all get there. It's like, oh, right, I'm a grown up. I live in a car dependent city. This is just a reality now, and it's just part of life. Now I need a car. We have this rite of passage at 16 where you get your driver's license, and it's marketed as this kind of freedom. Now you have a car. Yay, you can go anywhere. And then you realize years later that that freedom was really shackles, financial shackles. You have car payments, you have car maintenance, you have insurance, you have gas, the costs of paying for gas and all that. And then it is later, I think, that we realize, do I really want to live like this? And a lot of us don't. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to see that.
Yeah, one of the things I picked up on, you mentioned, the height of your parent limo days. You refer to them, right? When your kids are, going to school and dance classes and stuff. And I was curious about, like, could you have gone through this process earlier, or was it out of necessity, like, after your kids were no longer in that period where you were kind of responsible for this?
Why did I put him in so many classes? That's the question that I had to ask myself. Did I really need to put him in everything? Did they need to go to dance class across the city? Did they have to be so busy? Why are we doing this to ourselves? I think that's the question that I would have asked if I could have. So yeah, some of it is necessity, of course. What people say all the time is, how am I going to get my kids to hockey? And my answer now is, do they need to be in everything? Are we making our kids so busy that we are creating this car dependency? And that's fine. I think that it's unrealistic in a city like Winnipeg to think that you don't need your car ever. But I think that we could prioritize a lot of, or we could shift sort of the way that we use our cars. Do we need it to go to the grocery store? Do we need it to go to work every time? And yes, maybe you need your car to go to hockey or to go to Costco. But if we just shift our thinking and start thinking about the trips that don't require our car, we're going to start noticing that we can add a lot more of those into our everyday lives.
That does seem to be one of the repeat messages of the book, is reframing things, like asking the question, either why or what could we do otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to say that we need to give up our cars, death to the car. I'm just trying to say, let's just reframe things for a second. Do you need it for every trip? Is there maybe one trip a week that you can substitute for walking or taking transit or riding your bike? And as soon as you start doing that, you start feeling better, because there's something that happens when you get inside of your car and you get this feeling of like, I don't know about you, Michael, but I get angry the minute I sit down and I'm stuck in traffic. I'm not a good person. So imagine that all the time for every little trip that you need to make.
No, for sure. I get it. I have to like listen to music or podcasts to try and like counteract that.
Exactly.
So I'm curious about like the role of like social media in your journey back to the bike, right? Whether it's, finding community or going on YouTube to find, tips and tricks and things like that. Like, is that where you normally seek out things, or was it just a dearth of options elsewhere?
Yeah, as a woman riding a bike in winter in Winnipeg, I couldn't find really a lot of role models. I wanted to know, is this going to be something that I'm going to be able to do? And so my partner actually suggested to me, let's look on YouTube. Let's see what's out there. So we started looking around to see what was out there, and there really wasn't a lot, especially for the kind of winter that we have here. there was a lot of dudes in Lycra in the UK riding in the rain, calling it winter cycling. But there wasn't really a lot of examples of what that looked like. So I found someone in Calgary. His name is Tom Babin, and he has a channel called Shifter about urban cycling. And it was really interesting because he just kept it really simple. And he said, just only go on the days that are possible. Don't feel like you have to do this every day. Don't overthink it. Don't go shopping for a ton of different clothes. Just add a layer every time. Start in the fall. Don't do it in February for the first time. So he had a lot of great, like simple tricks and tips. And I thought, okay, I think this is doable. And so, but again, there was nothing for women and nothing for Winnipeg. So in going through this process of researching, I ended up deciding that I needed to be an example. So my partner actually suggested that we start a YouTube channel to help other people in Winnipeg, and especially women, start winter cycling, or just adding more cycling to their lives.
So obviously the like, don't plunge into the deep end tip of, like, start in the fall, don't go on like the coldest day of winter, ease your way into it is part of this. But then also e-bikes, that like there is like a propensity for like aggro behavior in terms of like brave the elements, damn the torpedoes kind of approach to things. And there's like antagonism towards people who don't go hardcore.
I don't feel that way. So the reason that it's funny you should bring this up, because the reason that I went with e-bikes wasn't damn the torpedoes. It was like, okay, this is really hard. My commute went from 45 minutes to an hour and a half because of the winds. Sometimes the snow drifts were insane. And I was just so stubborn, because when I started winter cycling with my regular bike, I got addicted to it. I was so excited and so like, I felt so powerful and invincible. And I didn't like it that I had to make too many calculations at the beginning of my journey. How's the wind? What direction is it from? Did it snow last night? Are there going to be drifts? Am I going to have to carry my bike for a whole kilometer like I did yesterday? So that led me to think, okay, an e-bike, maybe that'll take the guesswork away. And it was like magic. It was like I didn't have to look at the weather forecast. I just got on my e-bike and my commute became exactly the same length every single day. It didn't matter if the wind was bad or there's snow drifts. I was able to get around it because I had a little more power, and I didn't have to rely on my own power and get all sweaty, right? So it really did sort of shift the way that I looked at weather.
So it's a different version of damn the torpedoes is I'm just going to do it no matter what now that I have this e-bike.
Exactly. And it's funny when you ask people who have been winter cycling for years and years, they'll say to you, "Oh, just get a really crappy bike." That's possibly the number one advice that they give you. They say, get a crappy bike with just one gear, no maintenance, and then if it gets ruined, it won't matter. And I say the complete opposite. Make it luxurious. Make it amazing. You're going to end up not needing your car as much. Trust me on this one. You're going to leave your car at home so much more often. In my case, I ended up selling my car. My partner still has a car, but now we don't need two. So the cost of the e-bike was easily justified in that case. And I love my winter ride because I don't worry about the wind. I don't worry about the snow drifts. And I enjoy my ride because it's not a hard workout. It's just pleasurable to be outside enjoying the elements.
So instead of taking the tack of like embracing the suck as some hardcore cyclists do, you're like, why do that?
Why do that? We have a lot of suck to embrace in life as it is. I don't think that, getting to work should be it.
You referred to yourself as the bike mayor earlier, and it's not a self-defined term. This is a real thing. Maybe we can talk about how you became the bike mayor.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. It is definitely not a self-defining term, but there was no election per se. So the Bicycle Mayor Network, bycs.org, is an international organization that was started in the Netherlands, of course. And it's a network of bike advocates. There's over 200 of us all over the world. And it's basically a way to connect with other people who are bike advocates and to be a representative in your own city. I had to apply, so there was an application process on their website. First, you have to check if there are other bike mayors in your city or one other bike mayor in your city. In our case, we didn't have one. So I went through the application process. I had to submit reference letter from community leaders. And then I went through an interview process, and I had to pick two things that were going to be my mandate for my 2-year term. And I chose to one of them was to help normalize riding a bike for transportation. And the second one is to work with Bike Winnipeg, a local advocacy group, to help complete the bike network in Winnipeg.
Yeah, so the bike network, that brings me to infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that is a recurrent topic within this book.
Yes.
That, like this city is designed in a way that is antithetical to bike traffic. And, part of the reason of like an antagonistic approach to things is because the infrastructure itself is antagonistic to cyclists.
Yeah. It really is. And I think that we have to sort of stop for a second and realize that cars are new on this planet. The bicycle's been around longer. Pedestrians, we've been getting around by other means of transportations for, thousands of years. The car is new, and yet it feels like we have to prioritize it in such a way that we lose space to cars. Everywhere you look, there's highways. We have to take down housing to build highways. We have to take down parks and greenery, take away sidewalks just to add another lane, bro. It is just exhausting to see that kind of money being spent on cars when cars themselves are so expensive and hard to justify in the grand scheme of things. So bike infrastructure is so cheap, and yet there's such little political will in our city to make it a priority. People don't ride bikes here because they're cold or because they're lazy. The reason they don't do it is because they don't feel safe. And to tell drivers to slow down doesn't work. You have to build the infrastructure in such a way that it forces people to slow down at intersections, to look before they make a right turn on red. And so many more examples. I talk about it a lot. I even wrote a book about it.
Right. And obviously the most forceful example is Rob Jenner and his tragic death on Wellington. And obviously that is part of this book and part of your advocacy work, and really like points to this, right? Like the Wellington Crescent, for years, people have been pointing to this like it creates a speed zone, right? Like that people just are naturally inclined to speed along there.
Yeah, it is the way that it's built. If you drive down there, and many of us have, it just feels like, those car commercials that you see, where you can speed along and it's this nice turn that you can make, but people live around there. It's not a car commercial. You can't be speeding around a residential zone like that. So the way that road is built is very conducive to picking up speed. And so we need to change that. And yeah, the tragedy of Rob Jenner really brought the community together, and we found each other, and we really are working hard to make safe streets, safe speeds, an election issue next year. Because this past Friday, our 16th pedestrian was killed in a collision. That is not okay. That is not Vision Zero. It's not even close to Vision Zero, and it needs to stop.
Right. And obviously, this is something where bicycle advocacy is also pedestrian advocacy. Right?
Absolutely.
It's not cars versus bikes. It's like cars versus everyone.
Yeah, and it's not even versus, because you know who's safer? Who's safe when a pedestrian's safe? A driver is safe too, because nobody wants to have that on their conscience. You don't really want to kill someone. So when a pedestrian is safe, everybody's safe. The bike people are safe. The cars are safe. People in cars are safe, right? So yeah, the reason that bike advocacy ends up representing pedestrians is because we kind of see the city differently, and we're kind of a loud bunch. When you start riding your bike to work and using your bike for transportation, you really kind of become obsessed with this. And then when you ride your bike in winter, it's a whole other level of obsession, and obsession with safety and advocacy and passion for the city and passion for the people that you pass every day. It really is like a transformation that happens.
Yeah, one of the points you raise, and that I think is very salient, is about like the speed at which you're taking things in when you're on the bike versus the speed at which you're taking things in when you're in your car. You're aware of your environment more clearly on a bike, right? And just as like walking a neighborhood, you understand your neighborhood better. When you bomb through it on a car, you're not cognizant of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, the crisis with the unhoused, the drug problems in our city, the parks, everything. You just slow right down and you start seeing things differently. You start noticing, the cute little restaurant that has the bike parking in front. Oh, maybe I'm going to stop there. You start noticing your neighbors that you always see walking their dog. You start noticing other cyclists, especially in winter, the person sleeping on the bench. Everything becomes magnified because you're not going fast and you're taking in your surroundings.
We started talking about the fact that, you grew up in Brazil and, home of the future of rail transit. You also have a family connection to Amsterdam, and it just seems like wild that all these like alternative forms of transportation connect to you in some way. Maybe we can talk a little bit about like your experiences going to Amsterdam and how that contrasts.
Oh man, it's so hard. It's so hard going there. My brother lives there with his family, and it's painful because you get there and I just want to cry right from the first, from the first second that you get out of the airport. You start noticing that the car is a guest. The drivers are guests on the road, and they have highways where you can pick up speed, but inside the city, the drivers are guests. The bicycles have the right of way, pedestrians have their separate infrastructure. There's trams, and the way that it's hard to imagine that the last mayor elected, the platform they used was, I'm going to take away 10,000 parking spots downtown. That was the platform that got them elected. So they have this culture of taking away space from cars to give it back to people. So when I come home and I say, you know what they're doing in Amsterdam, and I'll tell that story to someone, and the first thing they say to me is, that'll never work here because blah, blah, blah.
That's obviously the title.
Yeah, that's why, because it was like I got so tired of hearing that. I would say something like, you know what they did in Paris or Sweden. And in fact, it was a coworker of mine. I had just read Invisible Women, where Caroline Criado Perez talks about how in Sweden, they shifted the priority of snow clearing from clearing roads for cars to clearing active transportation infrastructure and sidewalks, and how the GDP of the country increased because women could get around more easily, pushing their trams, riding their bikes. And I was just telling a coworker there, and she said, "We're not Sweden. That'll never work here." And that stuck with me because I thought, that's why it doesn't work here, is because we're always saying, we're not Sweden, we're not Paris, we're not Edmonton. What's next? We're not Regina?
I was going to get to Edmonton off of the heels of that, because obviously pointing to Amsterdam, it's like, yeah, okay, Europe wasn't built with cars in mind initially, right? That like a lot of the design
But
predates
it was, Michael. Here's the thing. In the 70s, Amsterdam was overrun with cars. They were making space for cars like crazy, and children were dying on the streets, left, right, and center. And mothers, and children took to the streets and shut it down and said, "Stop murdering our children." And this happened so often that the government had to do something. And that's when the shift began. So it's only 50 years ago that it started. So, it can work here.
And like you said, Edmonton, there's evidence that it can happen in North America as well.
Exactly. And they are shifting. They have a long way to go, but they have made huge gains in active transportation. Just the city staff is amazing. There's over 400 people in a department that here we have 12. They are educating the public. They're focusing on snow clearing. They're building. Last year, they added $100 million over 5 years above the regular road renewal that they already had planned. So they do one neighborhood at a time and add active transportation. And on top of that, they added $100 million for active transportation infrastructure.
So it can happen here. The political will needs to be there, and as you argue, there are opportunities for those political wills to impact themselves. I think hopefully folks read That'll Never Work here and then come out of it, either taking action in a political way or taking action on a cycle.
Absolutely. We need to make it an election issue. We need to let our political leaders know that this is important.
All right. Well, That'll Never Work here. The City Project, challenging the myths around biking in a winter city. Patty, thanks very much for joining me on the program, and congrats on the release of the book.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.